Yep.
I mean, there's that famous there's the it's just a social critic guy, Richard Florida, right, who writes about the creative class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He blocked me on Twitter a long time ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good. I think that's
Yeah.
that's a mark of honor.
Oh, it definitely.
Yeah,
I took it that way.
yeah. I mean, for those unaware, I think it's funny because I think the AI stuff fits into that kind of creative class model, right? Like
100%.
perfectly.
Yeah, definitely.
Folks, it's the new year. We are now in the future. You know what else is in the future? I guess like flying cars. Maybe
They
like
keep saying that to us. I don't know.
apparently eating bugs. That's one of the big ones. Not excited for that one. And of course AI. But AI has been here for years now. It's hardly a thing of the future. Is a thing of the increasingly terrifying present. Montreal, as some of you may know, some of you may not know, is an AI hub which receives hundreds and hundreds of $1 millions of investment from private firms, private companies, as well as public government funding bodies such as the Government of Canada and the Government of Quebec. Essentially, they're trying to turn Montreal into like an AI cluster. We have there's a lot of industries that are based in Montreal. Aerospace is one we've spoken about before on the show. And today we're going to be talking about Montreal's AI cluster. It's been a long time coming since the 80s and 90s where we've had kind of a small but, I guess, productive group of researchers. And nowadays it's sort of home to quite a few companies, around 60 or so companies that all kind of work together and try to make the world a better, more productive place. I guess that's the pitch. But I think something's up. I think there's more to the pitch. I think there's of course some hype. A lot of people talk about the AI bubble, and I thought, who best to burst that bubble than Paris Marx? Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Paris. For those of you who do not know, Paris Marx is a technology writer and critic. He hosts the award-winning Tech Won't Save Us podcast, and he is also the author of the book Road to Nowhere: What Silicon Valley Gets Wrong About the Future of Transportation. What do they get wrong about the future of transportation?
Oh my God, everything?
Everything.
Yeah. They really hate public transportation.
Okay.
They think everything should be oriented around cars.
Uh-huh.
And they love these big ideas for what the future should be, not just in transportation, with many other things as well.
Yeah.
That really don't ever come to pass in the way that they describe it. But in the meantime, we're able to delay on doing the things that would actually improve people's lives and throw a ton of money at tech solutions that don't work.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect introduction, I think, just for most of your body of work.
Yeah. This is what I do.
Yeah. Well, I think, people think about the future and technology, and there's always these like big promises that are sort of sold on that, on the backs of those things. And I think you are very, very incredibly sober-minded about these kinds of things. And you point out like a lot of the limitations that these people don't really talk about. I mean, one term I see often used about the sort of tech world and about AI is merchants of hope.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah,
It's a good one.
yeah.
I try to be able to do that, right? And part of that also comes from I was really pro tech for a long time, right? Like I bought into a lot of these myths that the tech industry tries to sell us. People might remember in the 2010s, AI was also supposed to eliminate a ton of jobs and new robots and all that kind of stuff. That's not what actually happened. What happened is, instead of wiping out half of all the jobs in the economy, you had companies rolling out AI solutions and algorithmic management and things like that in workplaces to reduce the power that workers have to be able to push back against them, right? And the same, in the 2010s was also the moment when self-driving cars were supposedly about to take off and everything was going to change. Part of the reason that my first book was about transportation. And so those were kind of like wake-up calls to me as I was falling for some of those things in the early 2010s, and then to see how it actually played out by the time we were getting to the mid and late 2010s to reassess what I got wrong in my assessment of the tech industry. And now, as new things come along, I try to apply that lens to what they're saying in the moment to get a better idea of what's going on
Right,
now,
right.
right?
Just be as clear-eyed as possible about
Exactly.
these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the reason I wanted to have you on at this current moment is we have a new mayor, new
Great.
municipal party in town. That's Soraya Martinez Ferrada and Ensemble Montreal. That is the old municipal outfit of Denis Coderre, someone who also at one point in time was kind of selling these AI pitches. Ensemble is back, and so are these AI solutions, I guess, for municipal things.
Love it.
Let's just get right into it. Like,
I would imagine as well, Coderre would have been like the 2010s as well, right? So it was
Right,
the
yeah,
last
yeah.
AI
Most of
kind
the-
of hype
most of the
moment.
20,
And now, of course, Soraya comes in at a moment where like the AI hype is also at a fever pitch. So it makes sense for them to both be like big
back.
pushers, right? Yeah, yeah.
I think the other interesting thing is like since like the actual timeline of like Coderre leaving office and like being voted out at like 2017 to this moment where Ensemble is kind of back in 2025, 2026 rather. You have like Montreal's AI kind of like ecosystem and industry has really advanced since then. I think,
Of course.
in each year since, it's almost like the jobs have doubled. I know jobs from between 2017 and 2019 have like doubled in the industry, right? And there's just constantly this outpouring of funding, which increases like the student body, the researchers here, as well as the other like administrators at these companies, and they keep kind of amassing more and more workers.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense that now it's back on the menu. You know,
Of course.
AI's back on the menu. Did it ever really leave? It's there's like a kind of I guess a bigger chunk of the Montreal voting population being these AI workers that are now kind of like, I guess, if they have these maybe let's say like fantasies or these big dreams with AI, they want to see that reflected in the municipal government. You know?
Of course. And, you also have like a broader kind of tech workforce in Montreal, right? Even beyond the AI stuff. And Montreal and Quebec generally have been really successful in building up like, the video games industry, which is associated with that as well, which I think is a good example of showing about how, really this public investment can help to create a kind of an industry, which of course you've also seen with AI and tech as well, right? By attracting all of this in. And even though there was like a lull in AI hype through the late 2010s and early 2020s, all of that stuff was still like chugging away in the background. And then, the fever pitch kind of, gets ramped up again in late 2022, early 2023 when ChatGPT comes out. And now generative AI is the next big thing and changing everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you brought up that connection to the video game sort of industry here in Montreal, like the video game VFX industry, film animation. It's like it's not just like happenstance, right? That these companies set up shop here in Montreal. It's been like a concerted political effort to get these kinds of companies and their capital bases here in Montreal, right? I mean, there's that famous there's the it's the social critic guy, Richard Florida, right, who writes about the creative class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He blocked me on Twitter a long time ago.
That's a good. I think that's a mark of honor.
Oh, it definitely. I took it that way.
Yeah. I mean, for those unaware, I think it's funny because like I think the AI stuff fits into that kind of creative class model, right? Like
100%.
perfectly.
Yeah, definitely.
And then so when we talk about the creative class, of course, we mean this. Richard Florida writes about how like cities and governments and whatever should attract not just like any worker, right? Because he tries to distinguish between different classes of like, let's say, professional workers.
Yep.
He really highlights like scientific, engineering, computational arts, like the video game industries, like everything that we've named so far, as a sort of an attractive kind of a population to bring into your city because the kind of way that they live, the things that they put money into, it's called nice cafes, bouldering gyms,
Absolutely.
and things that kind of maybe like spur gentrification in a certain way. It's just kind of like an ideal kind of class of people to bring.
Yeah.
And when I started doing this research on AI and how it's affected Montreal, I kind of see the same playbook, of like the province offering these kinds of subsidies for AI companies to set up shop here. They did the same thing with the video games industry.
Yeah.
And very notably, I think in the last few years, the subsidies were taken away from the province, right? And then you actually had like a mass layoff of these kinds of workers.
Or like slowly starting to be rolled back or something.
Exactly, right? So it's like, you're going to have this big boom, but like, I think my question is always like, I wonder how much of it is sort of like really like how much of it can't survive without these like subsidies,
Totally. And then, you add to that as well. Like if you're thinking about a city like Montreal right now, I obviously have, friends here who complain to me about gentrification and how, things getting more expensive. Obviously, we've seen the increase in rates, in rental rates and things like that since the pandemic in particular. Obviously the talk of, the condo buildings and stuff, especially going up downtown. So yeah, like there's a whole transformation here, and there's a particular kind of worker that governments are trying to attract that generally earn a lot of money. The
exactly.
companies who employ them are like bigger companies that you want to have in there. And then what is kind of the flip side of the decisions of trying to attract those particular industries, those type of workers, those type of people. There's often another segment of the population that gets left behind as a result of it, right? And it's not something that we see just in Montreal, but we see in many different cities that try to attract this kind of tech industry. And obviously, you can look at San Francisco as like
Huge, of course.
yeah, like San Francisco is like the best example of what happens when you can see the kind of inequality that is generated alongside of this massive wealth. But you look at these other cities that have done the same thing, and they have a very similar experience. It just might not be as extreme because the kind of size of the tech workforce is not as significant as it would be in somewhere like San Francisco.
It's like the same trends, but just in San Francisco, it's just dialed out all the way to 11.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I guess the AI boom continues for now. Our new mayor, unfortunately, our new mayor is talking about AI solutions to transform Montreal city services. Now, this is not, I think in my head, I'm like robots at the STM counters, maybe, maybe some kind of maybe some kind of robot filling up the potholes. It's unfortunately not that.
Yeah.
As it stands, let me read you some of the campaign promises from the last municipal election. 3 key initiatives for a more efficient city through AI. This is from Ensemble Montreal, the party that is now in power. Number 1, accelerate permit issuance, improve urban cleanliness, and optimize construction site coordination through AI. Number 2.
I love the through AI is like tacked on right at the end.
Yeah. They're like, we gotta remind them.
Yeah.
Number 2, create a municipal AI hub to integrate new technologies into public services and position Montreal as a leader in innovation. Number 3, organize a municipal AI summit to bring together technology partners, universities, and municipalities around concrete solutions. Quick thoughts on these.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Love it, guys.
Yeah. I think it's really funny, right? In part because it's not just Montreal doing this, right? You have so many governments, whether they're municipal governments, but at various different levels, who like over the past few years are talking so much about how they're going to bring AI in to make things more efficient, deliver services more efficiently. We even see at the federal level right now, Mark Carney's new budget assumes that AI is going to make service delivery a lot more efficient, and thus you can cut a bunch of public service jobs as a result. And it's really not clear that's going to be the case. And so if you look at kind of what Ensemble has put together, what you're seeing here is we haven't really seen like the tangible what this is going to look like. It's easy to kind of put out some vague boilerplate statements about, we're going to use AI, we're going to use new technologies, we're going to be innovative, things are going to get more efficient as a result. But what does that look like tangibly in practice? Is AI really necessary to improve urban cleanliness and issue permits more quickly or things like that? Or can there be things that are changing the
catch-all
administration?
magical term, right?
Exactly, right. Yeah. Which is the way it's used because, and you even think of the term itself, it's designed to, it really refers to a lot of different technologies, AI, right? And they're not saying generative AI specifically. They're just saying AI, even though all the hype the past few years has been about generative AI, the chatbots, the image generators, things like that. But are they talking about more more basic forms of AI that have been around for a really long time, algorithmic stuff that they're going to be rolling out? It's not clear, right? Because they also don't want to make it clear. Because if you say AI and you actually mean the old stuff, you still get the kind of
you get
AI,
that hitch onto that hype.
Exactly, right?
Of course,
So again, I think remains to be seen, but I think generally when you look at these types of proposals, whatever level of government you're looking at, often you don't actually need technology to improve these things. You need to look at kind of the way that things are set up right now, whether they can be done more efficiently. And I think there are also often concerns with trying to minimize kind of the human element of what is going into these decision-making processes because it's easy to say like, oh, the computer will know better or the computer will do this more efficiently. But what if the computer then makes a decision that is then harmful or discriminatory toward different populations? And that is something that we see very frequently with these, kind of AI systems when they're rolled out in public service, in the delivery of services by governments. I guess I think that's something that people are going to need to keep on their radars as the new government tries to roll these things out, or we see what they're actually imagining this is going to look like. Because, and again, like it's not just a municipal thing. I'm sure you'll see this from the Quebec government, but also from the federal government in Canada. We all kind of need to be on guard with these sorts of things.
No, I think it's a good thing you bring up the fact that these are kind of like most of these things, it's not hardly a thing that generative AI can solve, right? It's not like Soraya Martinez-Farad is in her office like, ChatGPT, give me a picture of a Montreal road with no potholes, and it's like mission accomplished. You know? I think that's a good thing to consider, right? There's this kind of like, I mean, that's just politics, right? Just trying to hitch on the hype.
Totally, and it's also like, you think about what the consequences are, right? So if you're seeing that services are not being delivered well at the moment, right? Why is that happening, right? Is it because there are processes set up right now that are not allowing that to happen? Is it because you don't actually have the human resources to deliver those services properly? You've cut the number of workers delivering these services so much that now you can't deliver them very well. And so it's easy then to go in and say, oh, we have these inefficiencies. You're not getting services delivered, in a proper time or something, or the way that you would expect them. We'll bring in AI and it's going to fix this. Right. Instead of saying, oh, maybe we need more people to actually do this better, or maybe we need to help those people to deliver these services in a more effective way. That doesn't involve AI, but maybe we've put something in place that makes it difficult for them to actually achieve this, right? And so it allows you not to look at like the tangible, real issues. It allows you to kind of gloss over that and say, look, we have a new technological system that's going to make this stuff so much better.
Of course, yeah. I think there's something about this that's like, underneath the veneer of the actual like technology that's named in this instance, right, AI, it seems like it's just kind of the same kind of playbook of like, especially at the federal level, right? It's like, listen, we're cutting jobs, but like, don't worry because we have AI, and people are like, oh, I guess I don't have to worry, And
it's like an enabler for austerity, right?
Right, no, exactly. It's just like it could be any other like time in history. It's like, don't worry, we're like cutting jobs, but we have the steam machine, which is going to help things along,
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting, right? I'm happy you brought up that thing about at the federal level, right? How they're talking about AI, and at the same time they're like cutting federal jobs. At the municipal level, you have Soraya. One of the big campaign promises that Soraya Martinez-Farad said was that there's a hiring freeze. There's not going to be any more new jobs created or hired for at City Hall. And then clearly, like, it's like, okay, it's kind of like you have classic austerity there. But then on the other hand, she's like, because AI is going to come in and sort of like maybe like, I don't know if it's just going to be kind of like whipping the people who are already working at City Hall or trying to increase their productivity. But it's like, it's just kind of the same austerity, right?
Totally. And it's exactly what you hear from Carney as well, right? Yeah. Because Carney is talking about actually reducing the size of the public service. And AI will make it so that the quality of the services that are delivered are not being impacted as a result of that. And like you just see it time and time again, right? How these narratives play out, how these governments approach it. It's not surprising at all that you see, whether it's at the municipal level in Montreal or whether it's at the federal level, they're all like using this playbook because there are challenges right now. There are challenges with budgets. Obviously, people generally are feeling the effects of an affordability crisis, and they don't want to hear about paying more taxes. And of course, I'm not sure about everything that the government here spends the money on, but obviously if you look at the federal government, they are splashing out a lot more on spending on military and all these sorts of things that Mark Carney is going for.
I mean, you replace military with police here in Montreal, and that's kind of like that's sort of the parallel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was the recent budget came out and something like the SPVM was over budget by like 60 million, and no one's gonna. It's just business as usual,
Totally, yeah.
They're not going to do anything about it.
Can't take on the police,
No, of course. I mean, we've seen past municipal governments with Projet kind of afraid to really call the police out on these kinds of cost overruns, and it's doubtful that Soraya and the sort of center right Ensemble Montréal can be putting any kind of resistance to the police. If anything, I think the police was the first actual like municipal division or a body that kind of got some AI software
Of
They
course.
got this was a report on by the Journal de Montréal. There's also a great article in Pivot by Alexandre Popovich about it, but he talks about how the police have acquired a software that they have said they're not going to name for. I'm sure it's a trustworthy reason, but it's going to help them kind of like scan through like hundreds of hours of like surveillance footage, like and then surveillance footage, of course, being from like whatever CCT, like
Yeah.
security cameras, but also like the footage they're going to scrape from like Amazon Ring doorbells and stuff like that.
So great.
Just to find perpetrators, you know.
I love it.
And that to me, that then I think about what you just said about how like there's these a lot of times with this kind of AI software or these tools, there's this kind of like built-in bias, right? That has like these real kind of social ills attached to them. And to me, it's the police having a tool like that is kind of a
Yeah.
big red flag.
And there's already like plenty of examples of police forces using AI tools and them having discriminatory impacts on
Right,
the
yeah.
public, right? Like this isn't like a theoretical thing. This is like very tangible. We've seen it before.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I mean, that's kind of it's one of the reasons I'm happy you're here talking about this, right? Because we have this kind of like we have this micro organism, right, of Montreal and the sort of way the AI tools are being developed here. But there's just like the way the AI industry functions, right? It's not like these tools are unique to Montreal, right? Often they're just like bought or like rented from whatever company who's
Absolutely.
selling them all across the world, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, like one of them is like Thales. Thales is set up here, right? Which
Yep.
is like a big like defense contractor, you know. And it's
course.
like while they sell it to other countries, they're going to be selling it to like it's like the tools is going to be the same no matter where it is.
Yeah.
And you have these kinds of repetitions everywhere.
And you see that time and again, right? Not just in, say, software that's being bought by police, but everywhere,
Yes.
you know? And especially now, you know, you see this on all levels of government, but especially now that we're talking more about kind of our reliance on U.S. technologies and you know, the degree to which they have been built into our governing systems, you know, the way our governments work, even, you know, the major kind of Canadian companies. So many are relying on these softwares developed by U.S. companies that we now realize can be withdrawn, turned off at any moment. There is talk about like, okay, what does it look like to do something different? What does it look like to develop something that is more Canadian, or you know, maybe we're finding better partners to procure from, or things like that. And if you see the types of things that the various governments who are pushing these initiatives are talking about, and certainly the way that the business community is presenting it, you know, the kind of Canadian tech CEOs and things like that, they do not want to see, say, the government of Montreal or the government of Quebec or the government of Canada move in and kind of like create a public body or a crown corporation that is developing technology for the public good.
Right.
They want instead for Canadian companies to be building the software and governments to be buying it from them, even if, or especially if that means like a further privatization of this kind of service delivery and things like that in Canada, in Quebec. You know, because they are going to profit off of that, whereas they're not going to profit if the government builds software that serves their needs, right?
No,
So yeah, there,
absolutely.
you know, it's, I don't know, it's really frustrating to me.
I mean, I think within this kind of like if we put our lens on the AI lens, I feel like you see so many of these kinds of patterns that we're kind of like well used to, right?
Yeah.
Before we talked about like austerity, now we're talking about like privatization
Yeah.
and these big like tech companies just being afraid of being they're having their talent kind of scooped up by like a big crown corporation and whatnot. It's like AI is supposed to be brand new. It's kind of, you look, you open up the hood and it's like, wait a minute, this is all like I know the drill.
Totally, and it's funny too, right? Like we were talking about the term AI earlier, but even like the concept of artificial intelligence has been around since the 1950s, when this academic named John McCarthy came up with it, because the like leading concept for, you know, his field at the time was cybernetics, and he wanted to develop something that was distinct so he could get a bunch of research funding. And so he came up with the term artificial intelligence and, you know, created this whole kind of
Sold
industry
well.
and research division around it. And now we're still talking about it now because artificial intelligence sounds a lot more sexy than large language models or
Right, of
machine
course.
learning or something, right?
Yeah,
And it allows you as well to like, you know, kind of put these ideas onto the term and onto the technology, right? It must be smart. It must be a computer that's thinking, you know, it's kind of like embedded in the term that you have these expectations. And then, of course, you know, you see these influential people in the AI industry, including these like godfathers of AI, you know, one being here in Montreal, you know, who kind of play on this as well and who talk about the technology potentially thinking for itself or, you know, starting to develop some degree of sentience or something like
Right,
that.
of course.
And like, if you're coming from my perspective, that is like science fiction ridiculousness at its peak, right? But it works really well for like the narrative that they are trying to sell. And so that when, the public or the media is talking about the problems with AI, they're talking about these potential like science fictional threats of AI taking over rather than the discrimination that comes out with rolling these systems out in public service.
It creates like another kind of like
Exactly.
an aberration to be afraid of rather than the real.
You don't
kind
talk
of
about the
things.
real tangible things. You talk about the science fiction and the fantasies instead. Right?
Under every AI video, that's like it's always one of those tech CEOs talking to some podcaster, and it's always like there's always a comment that's like, "I've seen Terminator." Like, I know how this goes.
Yeah.
It's like, buddy, it's already here.
Exactly. Yeah.
The police is already using it, man. It is discriminating against people. I mean, we're talking about these kinds of. I guess we're talking right now about like this kind of like ethics, right? The kind of moral side of things. Often, what I see from a lot of these tech CEOs, these tech kind of like I don't know pioneers, you want to call them, is just you have some of them who are try to talk about like the moral side of things.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that whatever we do, we kind of want to be moral, you know. And I do think Montreal is kind of particular because. I mean, even Canada at large is particular. I think I read that Canada was the first to actually have like a nationwide strategy plan for the like research and development section of AI, and they had a lot of money thrown at that. All these things are always from the AI, like the Montreal brochures. They're trying to attract these AI companies. You get like you get all
What's
the
the name of that
things.
organization that like goes out and tries to attract them? I can't remember now off the top of my head.
Oh yeah,
But
there's Montreal Industries, one of them, or Montreal International.
I think that's the one.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Because anytime I want to know, I'm like, all right, what are the bad guys up to? I'm just like, just check out the brochure.
Yeah.
And it's great because they name every company, they name all the big people. I'm like, all right, everything in one place. But there are people. I mean, naturally, right? Because it's kind of like it's like you said, it's been this kind of field that's been developing since the 50s.
Yeah.
Naturally, with this kind of fear mongering, there is a side of things where people are trying to talk about morals. People are trying to talk about how AI can be used for good. It doesn't always have to be defense contractors. So there is a special Montreal Declaration. This is the Montreal Declaration for Responsible AI Development. Yeah, this was sort of like there's like some of the real big players like when we're talking about that like Montreal like super cluster here that are kind of involved in this. I sent this to you because I was like Paris.
Yeah.
This seems like I'm like does this mean like they're good?
They're all good. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just I'm gonna start reading this. A declaration for what purpose? The Montreal Declaration for Responsible AI Development has 3 main objectives: develop an ethical framework for the deployment of AI, guide the digital transition so everyone benefits from this technological revolution, a term that is always used, open up a national and international forum for discussion to collectively achieve equitable, inclusive, and ecologically sustainable AI development. What do you make of this? I mean, these are. This sounds like they're kind of like speaking to our concerns to some degree.
Yeah, it sounds great, right? So it's interesting because this declaration has been around since before the generative AI hype wave, right? This was like 2017 or something like that this came together. So you can see that these discussions have been ongoing for a while. What AI is going to do, the effects it's going to have, these particular questions, which I don't think is inherently a bad thing to talk about. You want to think about the impacts of technology, what effects they're actually going to have on the world, make sure that they don't have harmful impacts that, some of which we've been talking about, right? But I think the issue, especially the past few years, when we see how these narratives have really been rolled out, is that on the one hand, you can talk about the ethics of AI in order to say we should still be developing these systems, we should still be rolling them out, we should just think about, how they're actually being impacted, what effect they're actually having. And we've seen in a number of the major tech companies at this moment that they often employ kind of tech ethics people in order to try to like whitewash or kind of give a good gloss to what
we
they're
got
doing.
a guy for like we got our ethics guy.
Yeah, he's thinking about this.
He
stuff,
said he
right?
gave us a thumbs up.
Yeah, but then when the ethics guys go rogue or say the things that the companies don't want them to say, they're out the door really quickly, right? Google fired Timnit Gebru, who was writing, trying to publish this paper on the impacts of AI that Google did not want to have out there. So instead, she was out the door. We even see with OpenAI, again, this is kind of getting back into the science fictional thing that we were talking about, but OpenAI has, these kind of 2 camps, one that wants to develop AI, thinks that it's going to be this like wonderful thing that's going to make so many different parts of life better. You know, you're going to be able to have an AI doctor and an AI teacher, and AI is going to do everything, and life is going to be great.
AI girlfriend.
Exactly. Yeah, well, yeah, and they are leaning into that
No,
now.
of course they are.
Yeah. And then on the other side, you have this like group of people who are like, if we develop AI, it could be like Skynet. You know, it could be this really scary force that's going to take over humanity and enslave us and all this kind of stuff. And so we need to like align it with human values. And so people might remember Sam Altman being the CEO of OpenAI, was briefly removed as CEO like a bit over a year ago. And that was in part because this group of like, people who are worried about alignment and about the big scary AI taking over didn't like how much he was pushing the technology and tried to take him out the door. And when he got back in, he basically like eliminated all of those people, right?
Yeah.
You know,
the kind of rules of power.
And then recently I read they were bringing back in some kind of like team to consider this stuff. It's like, okay, so a team that's going to work within what, Sam Altman allows them to say, basically, right? So I guess, that's all for me to say. I think it's fine to be thinking about the ethics, thinking about the impacts. I think that is an important thing to do. But I think that so often when you see these kind of declarations and these narratives around ethical AI, often that is, being used to justify the continuation of what these big companies want to be doing anyway. And to try to say like, oh, don't worry, we're thinking about the impacts. We're just really disregarding them and doing whatever we want, right?
Guys, you're in my thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, totally.
We're thinking about you.
Our climate pledges are all out the door because we're building all these massive data centers. We're rolling out these technologies that are like having these hallucinations, meaning they're presenting all this, unfactual information and expecting people to rely on it. We're creating technologies that allow people to go out and start undressing women and children.
Of course,
right? Like, and it's like, this is just a bad consequence that we'll take care of. It's not the core of the technology, but like, I don't know, it increasingly seems like a big part of the technology.
People can just use it for that, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's something that wasn't included in that kind of design. I think it's really interesting you bring up a place like Google, right? I haven't named any of the companies today, but like Google is one of the places that has an actual like AI research center in Montreal. Another one is like Facebook has one. Huawei, Samsung, also among the big tech companies that have kind of some foot in the Montreal AI door. I always think about how Google had that, like, this is like way back where they had that, like, it's something in their bylaws that said, don't do evil.
Yeah.
And then they took it out.
Yeah. It used to be their motto, like from the early days, right?
From early days, it's always, oh, it's
and
nice.
then it reached a point where they were like, evil is like profitable. And we've kind of like, worn out this like, okay, we're doing things nicely, we're being the good guys. We need to start doing the evil to make more money. And so we need to like drop this so people can't throw it back at us.
I think it was literally their lawyers who was like, guys, this might bite us in the ass.
Yeah.
Of course, it was the lawyers who made them take that off. Yeah. I mean, I guess I understand what you're saying about this kind of declaration, right? Like, it's all well and good that these companies are at least on some level like trying to like proclaim this kind of like ethical framework, I guess. But there's not really any kind of like, I mean, it's almost like talking about the UN, right? It was like there's not really nothing binding about it. There's no real strong enforcement of these things. Like what if one of these companies actually goes against this? What actual like consequences is there for that?
You can see that like, well, in practice with like all of them. As I said with Google already, its researchers started publishing or trying to publish things it didn't like, and so they saw the door very quickly. But like OpenAI, for example, was founded in, I believe it was 2015, as a nonprofit that was, so it's supposed to be all about having AI being open, making sure that it's not harmful to the public, blah, blah, blah. And then as, ChatGPT gets released, generative AI starts becoming a real, like, kind of profitable market. All of that stuff slowly goes out the door as they run for profitability at all costs.
Right.
And even trying to, like, convert the company as much as possible from a nonprofit to a private company so they can also cash in and all this kind of stuff. And you can very clearly see that the decisions they are making are not like, oh, we want technology to be aligned with certain values or, to be beneficial to the public. It's like, we want to do the things that are going to make sure as many people as possible are using our product, are paying for our product, are engaged with our product, such that Sam Altman even said a few months ago that they were like starting to lean into like the AI girlfriend stuff because they saw from other companies that was a really engaging use case, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, there's something, I want to zoom out a bit now.
Yep,
Like I feel like there's like, we talk a lot about, actually we haven't spoken too much about it yet, but like the kind of like detrimental impacts of AI for like on the ecological front, right? Like we're talking about data centers, these massive, absolutely massive sinks of water, right? And like other resources that takes to power them. What do you think of like the kind of social consequences of things like AI, of things like ChatGPT, right? Because like whenever like this kind of stuff starts to roll out, I just always think about Wall-E, right? Like you have the like in Wall-E, you have people who are kind of like more and more they kind of like
I love that movie.
where like and I know, but it's like every year it's like man, Wall-E. It's like it always comes back. Where it's like more and more you have this kind of like like these human beings who are kind of like they offset so much of whatever kind of function that they have to these kinds of machines and robots, right? And now we're talking about one of them, with AI being used for like this kind of like romantic thing, right? This is kind of like really, I find it's like like my quick read on this is just this kind of slow hollowing out of like what it is just to be human, right?
Yeah.
On that kind of philosophical front. I don't know. I'm kind of curious if you have any other like thoughts about the social kind of effects of AI and that kind of hole it starts digging.
No, I agree. And to me, I feel like it's not like AI has started something and, it is like the only example of this. To me, it feels like generative AI in particular and the chatbots and things feels like an extension of something that the companies have already been working toward for a long time, right?
Yeah.
The kind of goal of social media, other than that first initial phase where it was far less commercial, far less focused on making the money off of it, has really been around increasing engagement, getting you to spend more time on the platform. And many of these tech companies are really trying to like put a platform in the middle of any interaction that you possibly have in your entire life. And it is beneficial for them if you stay home or if you stay at work and you order in food, you talk to people via video call. Like the pandemic was fantastic for them, right? And we saw how much the tech companies really took off in those first couple of years of the pandemic when people were spending more time at home, were limiting their contacts before the vaccines and all that kind of stuff, right? And, I even think back to like, I think it was like 2015 or something. There was an article called the Shut-In Economy that was looking at what was happening in San Francisco and discussing this very idea, right? Like, this journalist, Lauren Smiley, had moved back to San Francisco and seen all of these like high-paid workers in their expensive condos, never using their kitchens because they were ordering in food all the time and they were working a ton and they were using gig services to get people to like do their laundry and do their cleaning. And like, it was like kind of extending this kind of, I don't know, way of life that we typically associate with like the ultra rich to like more of a segment of the population who could take advantage of these. But on the flip side of that was then more people whose jobs are like serving these people, right? And are doing these tasks and are paid very poorly for it, have few workers' rights and all this kind of stuff.
And so before, at least like a butler would like get paid well, Now it's just like, you get cents to the dollar.
Exactly. And so to me, it feels like, whether these companies have been like intentionally doing it or just kind of following the market incentives for a long time, we have already been moving in this direction where like, culture is being denigrated because it needs to be delivered in these ways that are profitable for these tech companies, that services need to change to work for the tech companies, that more and more needs to happen through a digital device, increasingly the one in your pocket, because that is beneficial for the type of world that they are profiting from. And so then we get to like the generative AI moment and you're able to like kind of ratchet these things up even further, right? You talk to your chatbot is your friend, your chatbot is maybe your girlfriend.
Your therapist.
Your therapist, totally. The idea is that you're kind of engaging with even fewer people, but people were already lonely before that because of the way that that society has been transformed over a much longer period of time. Even like the kind of erosion of more community spaces and places where people can get together and things like that over time, as these things are not necessarily profitable. So why are you investing in them? So they erode. So to me, it feels like kind of like the ultimate kind of like end game of what these companies are doing. And then you see like people kind of offloading their mental tasks to ChatGPT. You don't want to think about what you're doing. You don't want to read something and write about it. You don't want to do the work that goes into that. And we have actually seen studies that show that there is an impact on your ability to retain information,
critical thinking skills,
to think critically, all that kind of stuff. And maybe just to bring it back to something we were saying earlier, like the argument, I guess, that is being made by the people who are pushing us to roll this out, whether it's in industry or even Mark Carney or AI Minister Evan Solomon, is, they often don't want to address, the drawbacks that we're talking about, the effects that are happening on people. But their argument is that this is all about efficiency, right? Yet we've seen a number of studies come out recently, one from MIT, and there was a report in the Globe and Mail just a couple months ago that companies that are rolling these technologies out are often actually not finding the return on investment that they expected. So again, like going back to the efficiency point and, how this is going to make service delivery more efficient or make companies more productive or whatnot, that to me seems very unclear, yet we're being expected to shoulder all of these drawbacks for the hope or the faith that this technology is going to deliver, and that just seems so wrong to me.
Wow. There's a lot of stuff there to go on. I mean, even what you're describing, right, about how these tech companies want to get into these little facets of our life that like previously they didn't exist at, right? Like it's always like, I mean, I'm always kind of a little suspicious when people try to sell me on like smart this, smart that. It's like,
Totally.
I don't need my fridge to have like a computer chip, to whatever degree, or I don't need to have like a screen, or because it's just any instance to get more data on you to know how to like sell things to you better. To me, I mean, there's already been, I know there's a book about this already, but what it sounds exactly like is like this old the old kind of subject of like enclosure, right?
Of
like
course.
we talk about like back in like medieval England, you used to have just like land that belonged to everyone, common land, you know, and then slowly it was fenced in, sold off, privatized, right? And it's almost now you have that on this like immaterial. When you don't now have that, it's of course been a long time coming, right? But now you have that happening at an increased pace on this immaterial front about our lives and these different facets of our lives. And that's incredibly concerning, especially considering how much money they're putting into these things. And now you're saying also that there's also the risk that it's like a bubble and it's actually not going to be as profitable and and this comes back to Montreal because there's hundreds of millions of dollars being set up in the city here to prop up these kinds of jobs, to prop up this kind of industry. And then like, let's say once this bubble pops, once it's like, you have this like enormous collection of companies that like default and kind of crash and that there's no like kind of saving it anymore. Like, what happens to these jobs? What happens to this kind of like talent pool? What happens to all the money that's invested here?
Yeah, and even if it's not like this big everything crashes and everything is gone, but like even if it's like, oh, AI is not going to be the profitable thing that we thought, there's still a lot of layoffs that happen as a result of that when these big companies pivot to whatever is next. Or if you have these smaller companies, startups or whatnot, that are focused on AI, and all of a sudden that is not something that delivers a bunch of investment, if they can't pivot quickly to whatever the next thing is, then they're probably going under as well, right? And to me, I think it's really short-sighted when you see the government, kind of pushing money into the AI bubble and into like attracting and growing the AI industry and stuff like that, especially when it's positioned as like, Canada needs to lead on this because we're dependent on the US right now and whatnot. To me, it feels like we're kind of chasing this bubble. We're chasing something that is potentially going to collapse at some point. And again, it's not clear what the benefits are. And actually, we're seeing a lot of drawbacks that the government doesn't want to acknowledge or talk about or address. And it's like, okay, if we were really thinking about, trying to develop technology that actually helped people rather than, is chasing like whatever investors are going after, maybe instead of putting all this money into generative AI research and whatnot, we would be, maybe looking at a different form of tech development, that is focused on different outcomes, different goals. But unfortunately, I think what we see from the way that many governments approach this, especially when they're thinking about creating industries, it is really around like, where is the money? What is most profitable? What kind of companies have the highest valuation? How can we attract or kind of foster that where we are, rather than saying like, what is actually good for people? What would kind of like have a social benefit, even if it might not be the best thing for short-term GDP growth or something like that, right? Yeah.
I mean, everything in the name of growth, right?
Well, that's what it looks like now, yeah.
I mean, I think we're starting to get into something here I think we should talk about, right? Because I think, doing this kind of research about the AI hub in Montreal, there's some stuff I saw about like AI being used in like medicine and like surgeries and stuff like that, right? To do these very precise things like spotting maybe a cancer well ahead of time, right? Things that are almost imperceptible to humans, but like for whatever reason, AI can like track it, Like sometimes I remember every now and then I hear like those like really odd stories about like a dog that can smell Parkinson's and stuff like that. And it seems like now the AI is finally catching up to those kinds of dogs. What do you think? What do you think is some kind of good that could be coming from AI, if any?
Yeah, we get the robot dog that can smell Parkinson's now instead.
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
Put the flag Montreal on that. Though.
Yeah. Like, listen, I think that there are things that we can think about. To me, I think the benefits that we get from generative AI specifically, I think are hard to see.
Right. Sure. That's like your chat GPTs.
Exactly. Your chat GPTs, your image generators, your video generators, things like that. I'm very skeptical that the cost benefit ever works out, or that there are things that are really beneficial that come out of that, right? Because you think of right now, even if kind of governments and companies are adopting generative AI technologies, they're not paying the real price for what it costs to create this thing, right? Because all the companies are selling these things at a cost that is below what it is to actually deliver the service, because they're trying to capture market share, grow, all this kind of stuff, right? So yeah, I'm really not convinced on that, especially if we get to a point where the hype dies down and we say, what is this technology actually good for? What harms does it have? What benefits does it have? I don't think that generative AI is like gonna go away necessarily, but I think that the attempt to force it into so many different aspects of society is going to get reined in.
Right.
But as we were saying, AI refers to a lot of different things that can also be very basic, right? Spell check and stuff like that is a form of AI in some sense, right? And so I think that if we're thinking about older forms of AI that are far less energy intensive, we can already see that there are many ways that they're used in useful ways, whether it's for weather forecasting and whatnot, in medicine as well. But again, like, what is the right application there that is actually benefiting people? Maybe some of the things that you're talking about are places where it actually makes sense to be rolling out and developing this technology. But then you also see the attempt to kind of get doctors to use generative AI and chatbots in kind of patient records and things like that, creating a lot of errors in those records, or even transcribing conversations, but then injecting errors into those conversations that were never there.
Hallucinations.
Hallucinations is the term that is often used because it sounds, I think, a bit nicer for industry to say, and it also makes you think that the system is thinking in some sense,
the system's
right?
tripping.
Exactly. But it's also like, if you are relying on these technologies for healthcare, there's the push to just get people to use generative AI as their doctor, which is very worrying. But yeah, we also see like there's been talk in the past of using these technologies for like, detecting things in X-rays and in different types of scans and tests. And what we often find is that, there have been a number of studies on this. When this is rolled out, what we can see is that the doctors then don't pay attention as much to what is going on, or kind of trust what the system identifies, rather than doing their kind of like, verification of what's going on here. And it can cause things to be missed or things to be identified that aren't. So there are always kind of implications that come with the rollout of a technology. And I'm not against developing technology. I just want to make sure that technology actually serves the public rather than the bottom lines of companies. And then we need to accept the fallout from accepting technologies that don't work for us because they make a lot of money for certain people. And so that's why I think that, especially at a moment when we're like reassessing the relationship to the US, the technologies that we're relying on from US companies, that the focus should not be solely to develop some kind of industry that's going to do its own version of Silicon Valley, but to say, now's the time to say, okay, we have this whole private sector tech development arm, but we need to put more resourcing into the public side of this to think about technology for the public good that actually serves us, rather than, so much of that focus being on what is profitable rather than what is good for people.
Because if it's on the public front, then it's at least it's publicly accountable, right? Like
Exactly.
the thing that these people are doing, actually, the public gets to have a say on this.
Yeah, why should the government be run on Microsoft 365, Microsoft Office, that whole suite? Why should so many of our schools be using Google Classroom as the foundation of how they work and how they communicate and how students access things? Like, these things all seem ridiculous to me, to be quite frank. And I think that there's a real opportunity to start actually questioning the technologies that we rely on right now and developing technologies that serve us, but are also not kind of wedded to these massive corporations that don't have our interests in mind.
Incredible. Last question.
Yeah.
Do you have any words for any Montreal policymakers who might be a little drunk on AI?
Maybe don't fall for the hype. That would be a good one. And actually think about, what effects these technologies are actually having on the public, to make sure that if you are rolling out a new technology, it's serving people rather than just hopping on a bandwagon, and then we need to deal with the consequences down the line, which is never good.
I got something to add for them too. Thank you for watching Local 514. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell your other policymaker friends, I guess. Keep enjoying the show. Thank you so much, Paris, for coming on the show, talking about this.
It's
This
been
was
fun.
a real great conversation. I mean, it's going to continue. We'll see where things head. You know,
Yeah.
It's just the start of 2026. I'm Colin Danspa. Thank you for listening, watching to Local 514. This is our guest, Paris Marx. Thank you, folks.
Thanks.